Oh, okay, we'll have to add that next time. We'll watch for it when it has building 7 come out. Okay, this is one of the experiments I did, a steel cut using steel cut in a Thermate experiment. You can see that it was cut dramatically and shows this corrosion and sulfur attack on the steel in these experiments. So, here's the question that was posed to NIST and which they answered. Was the steel tested for explosives or thermite residues? The combination of thermite and sulfur, called thermate, slices through steel like a hot knife through butter. So this is, that sounds like a quote directly out of our interview, Alex, actually. Answer to the public. NIST did not test for the residue of these compounds in the steels. I'd like to ask how they get away with that. It's in the code. Well, okay. But, you know, this is something, as scientists, we expect them to do. Now, part two, that's actually, yeah, Alice is breaking the law. And since they did not follow the NFPA code, I would have to agree. Because it's required as part of the code to, when there's a crime scene with fire, you look for thermite. Okay, this is, now this is the new stuff. Of course, the other, pouring it out, I haven't shown that before, ever. Last week, actually, or no, this week, Thursday. Okay, we did that. I'd done it once before, but never shown it before. Okay, now we want to look at these spheres. I call them microspheres because they are tiny. The scale here is 200 microns. These are, this one is 150 microns. Most of these little spheres in the dust are tiny. They come in sizes from a few microns up to over a millimeter. A millimeter is about a 16th of an inch. You see that with your eye. This is from an electron microscope, a scanning electron microscope image. Now, these spheres are abundant in this dust. This is dust from the 9/11 disaster. On 9/11, this is Jeanette McKinley. She had an apartment. Here's a picture of the inside of her apartment. Here's the outside. It's across the street. It's about here. So across Liberty Street and down a little ways from the towers. When the South Tower collapsed, the windows broke in her apartment. She was inside. She was not expecting the towers to collapse. And she stayed inside and, of course, left very quickly when the South Tower collapsed and the window broke. So the pressure from that, we've all seen that dust cloud, right, expanding through the streets and so on. There's also debris. In her apartment there were chunks of concrete and glass, chunks of glass and concrete. So they just blasted, of course there's windows, 2 windows that are broke, but it just blasted through. She had the foresight to put a wet towel around her head to get out of there. It's a very good idea. This dust turns out to be very toxic. And even though the EPA said it's safe, go back to work in the financial districts, you may have heard of that story. There are lawsuits now because of this. It was known before the EPA issued their false reassurances that the dust was in fact dangerous. That's another story. It's related though because of this dust. So she was able to get out of there. Several days later she got back into her apartment and cleaned up. You can see things are just covered with dust. And 4th floor apartment, and she's cleaning up. And she told me that she had this spiritual sense, is the way she put it, as I recall, to save some of the dust, realizing the history of how that had come about. And so she did, in a plastic bag. Some of it was sent directly to me. Some of it, I traveled into her apartment, or to her residence. She had moved by this time to California. And I got another sample in the presence of scientists, some more of this dust. By the way, if you have friends that have some of this dust, please let me know. I'm interested in more of the samples. It's like the dust. Isaiah, I was reading Isaiah just this week. He says, speaking of the last days, the dust will, the truth will whisper from the dust. He says. Now, we're going to look inside. Now, these inside, you saw the little spheres. They turn out to be iron rich. The first question is, could this just be melted steel? I pointed out you don't expect steel to melt in fires with kerosene or paper, office materials. And indeed, one of the scientists said your gut reaction would be jet fuel made the fire so very hot. A lot of people figured that's what melted the steel. Indeed, it did not. The steel did not melt. The temperatures of these fires in the towers would be, could approach 1,000 degrees, yes, but steel centigrade, but steel melts at 1538 plus or minus a little centigrade. So you're nowhere near enough, hot enough. And as Professor Eager also pointed out, the temperature was not unusual in the WTC, most definitely not capable of melting steel, and that we agree. So we're going to look now using an electron microscope with microprobe. Here's the electron microscope. And we see the image on the screen and look at this.